Praise God, yet another victory for faithful Catholics who adhere to the magisterium. Another W for us. Man, the congregation or dicastery for the doctrine of the faith is just really doing well lately under Fernandez, the new head of the dicastery, appointed by Pope Francis, Cardinal Fernandez. Left and right, he's been responding to dubia, inquiries, questions about all kinds of theological matters. They've been knocking it out of the park. I feel like he has done more in about 1 month or 2 months of being in office than some of his predecessors in their entire term. He's been knocking it out of the park. I'm liking Fernandez. Now, of course, the pseudo traditionalists don't like him, and have attempted to engage in a smear job against him. I've responded to a lot of those things. They've even hidden and covered up some of his interviews that opposes their narrative about him and the Holy Father. Yes, interviews where he explicitly says the church does not bless sin and does not bless gay unions. Pope's right hand man says that. They sit on these interviews, they don't promote it. Well, guess what? The pseudo traditionalists are also not promoting this news today. The dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, Fernandez and Pope Francis, clearly, with no ambiguity, show that you cannot be a Catholic and also a Freemason. Now, isn't that interesting, given how many people say, oh, Pope Francis is a Freemason? Oh, Fernandez is a Freemason. And yet, here the magisterium, under the leadership of Pope Francis, with Fernandez as his right hand man, comes out and explicitly says, nope, you cannot be a Freemason and be a Catholic. They are opposed to each other. Yet another win, but also yet another instance in which the pseudo traditionalists are silent. Now, if it had gone another way, can you only imagine? If Pope Francis had come out and said, you can be a Freemason and be a Catholic, you would have heard about that all over the news, both Catholic and secular. It would be everywhere. The pseudo traditionalists would be hammering this home that this is all you would have heard. And yet, silence. The sound of crickets. They're silent. Why? Because it is opposed to their narrative that the Pope is a liberal, that the Pope is a Freemason plant, that the Pope is the right-hand man of Satan. It goes contrary to that narrative, and so they don't shout this from the rooftop. Just like they've skipped over some of the other documents that Fernandez has recently released by the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, such as where Fernandez has explicitly shown the Holy Father says for people living in adultery, they don't get to just go straight to communion if they're living in adultery. Absolutely not. They need to go to reconciliation. You didn't hear that. You know why? Because it's contrary to what the pseudo-traditionalists have been telling you for years now about Amor Laetitia. It's contrary to the narrative that they've been promoting about Pope Francis. So you didn't hear about that one. Take a look at this. Look at some of the documents that are being released. And let's take a look at the one on Freemasonry. Here's the one to Cardinal Duca on the question of Amor Laetitia. Pope Francis answers a lot of questions about Amor Laetitia and includes the response that he accepts John Paul II's decision on the question of divorce and remarried people in relation to communion. He accepts Benedict the 16th, and he also directs people who fail to live in continence. If they engage in adultery, he directs them to the sacrament, not of the Eucharist, but of reconciliation. That is confession. You won't hear about that from the pseudo-traditionalists. But yet another victory right here. DDF comes out with a document on Freemasonry. And it's only one page long, very easy to digest, something that people could share very easily on their social media in one screenshot. And yet we're not seeing this floating around on social media. However, we are seeing a fake letter written by someone who is not actually a Catholic bishop circulating all over online because it's in favor of Bishop Strickland. It slanders Pope Francis, engages in fake claims and fake news about Pope Francis, defends Strickland, and it's not even written by a Catholic bishop. But people are spreading this on social media and saying, I am so happy to see a Catholic bishop stand up and defend this. They're sharing that, but they're not sharing this. Why is that? Because it's contrary to their narrative. The Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, note for the audience with the Holy Father, 13th of November, 2023, the request of His Excellency, the Most Reverend Julito Cortez, I'm sure I butchered the pronunciation of his name there, on membership in Freemasonry by the Catholic faithful. Recently, His Excellency, after explaining with concern the situation caused in his diocese by the continuous rise in the number of faithful enrolled in Freemasonry, asked for suggestions regarding how to respond to this reality suitably from a pastoral point of view, taking into account also the doctrinal implications related to this phenomenon. So, how do we approach people pastorally who are struggling with this issue in light of the doctrinal problems surrounding Freemasonry? Membership in Freemasonry is very significant in the Philippines. It involves not only those who are formally enrolled in Masonic lodges, but more generally a large number of sympathizers and associates who are personally convinced that there is no opposition between membership in the Catholic Church and in Masonic lodges. To address this appropriately, it was decided that the dicastery would respond by involving the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines itself, notifying the conference that it would be necessary to put in place a coordinated strategy among the individual bishops that envisions two approaches. Now, here it is. On the doctrinal level, it should be remembered that active membership in Freemasonry by a member of the faithful is forbidden because of the irreconcilability between Catholic doctrine and Freemasonry. And then they even point us to the 1983 Declaration on Masonic Associations by the same congregation and the guidelines published by the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Philippines in 2003. Again, if this had gone the other way, you would hear all about it. But because it went this way, silence, crickets, you don't hear anything. It's contrary to the infiltration narrative. And so you're not hearing about it as much as you would have heard if it had gone the other way. Now, I do want to say, I imagine at some point you will hear about this from the radical traditionalists. They'll be relatively slow to address it, but at some point they'll address it. But I'm pretty sure they're going to put a spin on it. They'll figure out some way to maneuver this thing, put a spin on it, and have headlines that says Bishop Fernandez and Pope Francis approve of Freemasonry. They'll figure out some way to twist this thing. Mark my words. Mark my words. They'll figure out a way. But you'll know better because you've actually read through the document. Therefore, those who are formally and knowingly enrolled in Masonic lodges and have embraced in Masonic principles fall under the provisions in the above-mentioned declaration. Ooh, and you'll want to look at those measures, right? Because one of them includes excommunication. These measures also apply to any clerics enrolled in Freemasonry. Bam! Addressing that one too. On the pastoral level, the dicastery proposes that the Philippine bishops conduct catechesis acceptable to the people and in all parishes regarding the reasons for irreconcilability between the Catholic faith and Freemasonry. So help them understand why the church has this position. Don't just tell them here's the answer and that's it. No, help them understand why. Finally, the Philippine bishops are invited to consider whether they should make a public pronouncement on the matter. From an audience on the day of November 13th, 2023. So that was 2 days ago. Fernandez and bam, Francis. Right there. Love it. Francis. So you can't question, oh, is this really magisterial? Is this really authoritative? Yes, it is. Right there. The Holy Father. Now tell me again that Pope Francis is a Freemason. Now tell me again he's infiltrated the church. Tell me again that Fernandez is a Freemason. Oh, it's probably the case that they're really undercover Freemasons, you see? And this is the way of covering and hiding their tracks so they can operate in the shadows. They condemn Freemasonry so that they're not as conspicuous because they're Freemasons themselves. I bet you'll see these kinds of spins being promoted by the pseudo traditionalists relatively soon. You'll probably see that. In other words, no matter what is said, no matter what is done, they can't win. The Pope can't win. Not with some people, because they take an approach of suspicion and they can never just say, okay, that evidence, maybe that changes things. And maybe I need to rework my paradigm and narrative and my impression here. Yeah. A lot of people don't do that. They don't rework, do things. Some people do. Some people do. A lot of people don't, though. So be ready. Soon they'll start addressing it and they'll put some kind of spin on it and they'll say, well, you see, it didn't say this, or, oh no, this is just a plot to infiltrate the church by condemning Freemasonry, but really approving of it in the condemnation of it. And they'll figure out a way to spin it. Mark my words. And I hope I'm wrong about that. I'd love to be wrong and to come back on here maybe a week or two from now and say, well, you know what? I didn't hear any fake news being spun about this document. Hey, I was wrong, y'all. I was kind of gun shy and, missed the mark on that one. I'd love to come back and say that. We'll see, though. Hey, thanks so much for these super chats. Let me grab them. Riverman, the Mason's ultimate purpose forces itself into view, namely the utter overthrow of that whole religious and political order of the world, which the Christian teaching has produced. Leo the 13th. Thank you for that super chat that you have here. The new narrative is that he will be clear about Freemasonry, but he won't be clear about just exactly how transsexuals are sinful and when they can't be admitted to baptism. Well, and he's been clear about that. And so here, look at the other documents, go to them, straight to the source for yourself. You actually look at the transsexual document. I did do a whole stream on it, but you go to it, Google Translate will give you English. They've been adding English translations, by the way. You can see those here. But eventually, or pretty soon, they'll have an English translation here. But you can Google Translate it, see what it says in English, and you'll see that it explicitly refers to in baptizing a transgender person, they're subject to the same conditions as everyone else. And obviously one of those conditions is repentance, right? I mean, you can't be baptized without that condition. And so that's true of everyone. So all the fake news that, hey, obstinate people who are engaging in this sin can now be baptized. Yeah, that's not what the document says. That's just, again, fake news, putting a spin on things, once again, creating confusion when there wasn't any confusion in the document itself. So maybe go and check out some of those documents and keep an eye on the DDF. Keep an eye on this page, because it looks like we're going to find more stuff here every week where they're addressing all kinds of stuff. And it's more and more victories for the magisterium and for faithful Catholics who are fighting against fake news, fighting against the narrative that so many pseudo-traditionalists are engaging in. All right, Mahovo says it's never clear enough, no matter what. Why? Because. All right. Well, hey, I appreciate that super chat. Thank y'all so much for watching. Stay tuned. I have a few more streams, at least one more that I'm going to do later today. So stay tuned for more. Look for another stream link. But I wanted to sneak this one in there. Share this on your social media so people hear the word and it helps dispel the narrative about Pope Francis and about the Catholic Church and about it being led by a Freemason and stuff like that. Hey, also hit that subscribe button. Help me grow this channel. That is how I will reach new people with this information who have never heard of reason and theology and have never heard the other side. They've only heard the fake news. Help me reach those people. You can do it by hitting the like button, commenting, and subscribing. That helps with the algorithm. Also, if you want to support me, because I am entirely dependent on patrons, patreon.com/reason and theology, or the GoFundMe or PayPal link there in the show notes. Help support the program if you believe what I'm doing is helpful and is reaching people with the truth that they need to hear. Please help me accomplish that. I do need your assistance, not only your financial support, but also your prayers. I would greatly appreciate that. Okay, that's going to do it. See y'all in a little bit. God bless. Are you a Catholic thinking about converting to Eastern Orthodoxy? Or are you a Protestant discerning whether or not to become Catholic or Eastern Orthodox? If so, I have the book just for you. It's called Answering Orthodoxy. It engages all of the arguments that Eastern Orthodox use against the Catholic Church. I respond to all of them. I show that they are in error, and in fact, they're inconsistent, because the things that Orthodox are objecting to are in fact found in their own tradition. So the fullness of the faith can only be found in the Catholic Church. Check out the book right now at shop.catholic.com for your copy today.